My husband looked me in the eye and said, "You should be thankful I married you." And that's when I knew something had to change. I was 19 when I married a 40-year-old man. Yeah, I know. Gross, right? We started dating when I was 17, and even back then, I knew it wasn't exactly normal. But that's what happened. Let's be real here. The only reason he married me was because I was hot. No, I'm not being self-deprecating or modest. That's just the truth. And the only reason I married him? He had money. There were other reasons, sure, but deep down, that was the biggest one. I had my charms and he had his. Let's call it a trade. Fast forward 20 years. 4 kids later, we're still together. Stable, comfortable. We have a lot in common now. You kind of have to when you've spent that much time together. And yeah, we love each other. But would I do it all over again if I had the chance? Hell no. If I could, I'd go back and slap my younger self right across the face for being so naive. Here's what no one tells you. And even if they did, you wouldn't listen. Because teenagers always think they know better. Marrying someone like this means you'll owe him. For everything. Every single day of your life. It's not just about owing him for the money, though. It's deeper than that. He doesn't have to say it out loud. You'll just feel it. In every look, every decision, every argument, there's this unspoken reminder. You're here because of me. It's not just the bedroom. Although, yeah, that too. It's the tiny things you never think about until they hit you. Like what you wear, where you go, who you talk to. Decisions you should make for yourself suddenly feel like they need to be cleared with him. And then there are those moments, the ones where he pulls rank for no reason at all, like dropping a bomb in the middle of an otherwise normal day. It'll leave you reeling, like the ground's just been ripped out from under you. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate my life. It's fine. I made my choices, and I'm living with them. But would I recommend this to anyone else? No way. My oldest daughter is 15, just 2 years younger than I was when I met my husband. And when I look at her, the thought of her doing what I did makes my stomach turn. So here's my advice to anyone thinking about it. Don't. Just don't. If you're young and you think you're in love, or worse, if you're doing it for money, stop and think about what that'll cost you in the long run. Trust me, it's a bigger price than you realize. Update 1. The other day, something clicked in a way it hadn't before, and it's been on my mind nonstop. My youngest daughter was showing me some art she made at school. Cute, colorful, and messy, like you'd expect from a 9-year-old. She handed me one that had "Mom" scrawled in crayon. It made me smile until she said, "I showed Daddy first, but he said it was okay, so now I'm showing you." I froze, right there at the kitchen counter. That one tiny throwaway sentence hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just sharing something with her parents. She was clearing it with her dad before she thought it was worth my time. I couldn't stop thinking about how that dynamic mirrors my own life, like I accidentally passed it on without even realizing. I've always known our marriage was unequal. It was built that way from day one. He was the provider, the authority figure, the one who made the big decisions, while I was the one who looked good standing next to him, I guess. That sounds harsh, but it's not untrue. I thought that was fine when I was younger. I thought he's older. He knows more than I do. But I didn't realize what that would feel like years down the road. Or what it would look like to our kids. It's not like he's a tyrant. He's not. Most of the time, we're fine. But the inequality is everywhere, embedded in every little corner of our lives. If I want to spend money on something, I ask him first, even though it's our money. If there's a disagreement, I defer to his opinion, because somewhere along the way, it just became easier to let him win. He doesn't explicitly say I owe him, but it's there, under the surface, all the time. Sometimes he'll pull rank over the smallest, most ridiculous things. Once I wanted to repaint the living room. Nothing crazy, just a fresh coat of paint. I even picked out a color that wasn't far from what we already had. When I brought it up, he immediately shot it down, saying it wasn't necessary, and that we could spend the money on something else. I didn't argue, I just let it drop, even though it was such a minor thing. But later he went out and bought some stupid gadget for the grill, and when I pointed out the hypocrisy, he just shrugged and said, "I work hard for this family. It's not the same." And that's the thing. It's never the same. His needs, his wants, his opinions, they always seem to matter more than mine. Not because he says so, but because that's the dynamic we created when I was 19 and thought it was a good idea to marry a man 21 years older than me. I don't think he even realizes how much it weighs on me sometimes. I doubt he's even thought about how this marriage would look if the roles were reversed. I've never brought it up. I wouldn't even know how to start that conversation without it turning into a fight. And honestly, I don't know if it's worth it. He's not a bad guy. He provides for us, loves our kids, and has never been outright cruel. But he doesn't see me as an equal. I'm not sure he ever has. The other day, our oldest was asking for advice about college applications, and I caught myself deferring to him, like I always do. I have a degree, I've been through the process, I know what I'm talking about. But as soon as she asked for help, my first instinct was to say, "Ask your dad." Why? Why do I keep doing that? Why does he automatically get to be the authority on everything, even when it's something I'm perfectly capable of handling? I'm trying to figure out if this is something I can change, or if it's just too late. Can you unlearn 20 years of being second place in your own marriage? Or is this just how it is now? I've been sitting with that question for days, and I don't have an answer yet. Our kids are watching this dynamic play out every single day. They're absorbing it, even if they don't realize it yet. And I don't want them to grow up thinking this is normal, that this is what a marriage is supposed to look like. Especially my daughters. I want them to stand up for themselves, to demand respect and equality in their relationships. But how can I teach them that when I've spent my entire adult life doing the opposite? I don't regret my kids or the life we've built together. But if I could go back, I wouldn't make the same choices. At 19, I thought I was so mature, so ready to take on the world. I wasn't. I didn't understand what I was signing up for, or how hard it would be to untangle myself from the consequences of those decisions. Now I just want to figure out how to move forward, how to reclaim some part of myself that I lost along the way. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know I can't keep ignoring it. Not for me, and definitely not for my kids. Update 2. A few weeks ago, my oldest daughter came to me with something that caught me completely off guard. She said, "Mom, how did you know you wanted to marry Dad?" I don't know why, but that question hit me like a truck. She wasn't asking for fun or out of curiosity. She wanted advice. I could tell from the way she asked, from the look in her eyes, that she was genuinely trying to figure out what makes a relationship worth committing to. I felt this knot in my stomach because the truth is, I didn't know when I married her dad. I wasn't making a decision based on love or shared goals or mutual respect. I was 19, and I wanted security. That's it. And now here was my daughter, 2 years older than I was when I met my husband, looking to me for guidance. I tried to answer her in a way that wouldn't scare her or make her think I regretted everything. I said, "I don't think you ever really know. You just have to make sure you're with someone who respects you, listens to you, and makes you feel like an equal partner." It felt so hypocritical coming out of my mouth. She nodded and said, "That makes sense," and went back to her homework. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Because what kind of example am I setting for her? What is she learning from me? The other day, I was folding laundry when my husband came in and asked if I'd decided on what we were doing for dinner. That's a normal conversation in most households, but in ours, it always feels a little heavier. It's not a simple, "What's for dinner?" question. It's a test, a subtle way of saying, "You're in charge of this, but it better be something I like." I told him I was thinking about making spaghetti, and he just kind of sighed and said, "Again?" It wasn't a big deal, but it stuck with me because it's these little moments that add up. They're like tiny reminders of the imbalance between us, reminders that I'm always trying to keep the peace, even over something as stupid as dinner. I've started noticing how often I shrink myself around him, how often I defer or stay quiet to avoid conflict. It's like I've been doing it for so long that I don't even realize I'm doing it anymore. And it's not just with him. I catch myself doing it with other people too. Friends, coworkers, even strangers sometimes. The worst part is I'm starting to see it in my kids. My middle daughter, who's 13, was telling me about a group project she's working on at school. She said one of the boys in her group keeps dismissing her ideas and she's letting it go because it's not worth fighting over. That phrase, "not worth fighting over," sent me spiraling. How many times has she heard me say that? How many times has she watched me let something go because I didn't want to make waves? I want to tell her to stand up for herself, But how can I do that when I'm not setting the example? She's learning to be like me, and that scares me. I've been thinking a lot about how to change things, not just for me, but for them. I don't want my daughters to grow up thinking this is what a marriage looks like, that this is what they should accept from a partner. And I don't want my son growing up thinking it's okay to treat a partner like their opinions matter less. The problem is, I don't know where to start. I've been married for 20 years, and we've been stuck in this dynamic for so long that it feels impossible to change. But the thought of doing nothing is worse. I tried bringing it up to my husband the other night, but it didn't go well. I told him I've been feeling like our marriage is a little one-sided, like I don't always feel like we're equals. He looked at me like I'd just insulted him. He said, "I don't know where this is coming from. I've always treated you well." He's not wrong. He has treated me well in the sense that he's never been cruel or abusive, but that's not the point. The point is that our relationship isn't balanced, and it never has been. I tried explaining that, but he just got defensive. He said, "I've given you everything, and now you're complaining?" I dropped it after that because I didn't know how to respond. I don't want to sound ungrateful. I know he's done a lot for our family, but that doesn't mean I should have to keep shrinking myself to keep the peace. I don't know where to go from here. I'm starting to realize that this isn't just about him. It's about me too. I've let this dynamic persist for so long because it was easier than fighting it. But now I'm seeing how it's affecting my kids, and I can't ignore it anymore. I don't want to wake up one day and realize I've spent my whole life making myself smaller. I don't want my daughters to grow up thinking that's what they have to do, or my son thinking it's okay to expect that from a partner. I want better for them. And I think for the first time, I want better for me too. Update 3. It's been a whirlwind since I last wrote, but things have finally come to a head, and I want to share where I've landed. A few weeks ago, I had a moment that made everything crystal clear. My husband and I were having dinner, and he made a comment about how lucky I was that he'd taken care of me all these years. It wasn't the first time he said something like that, but for some reason it hit differently this time. I felt this surge of anger, not because he was wrong, but because he was right. I've let him take care of me, and it's cost me more than I ever realized. That night after the kids went to bed, I sat him down and told him I couldn't keep living like this. I didn't sugarcoat it. I said, "I feel like I've spent 20 years being less of myself, and I can't do it anymore." I told him how I've felt overshadowed, how I've let myself shrink to fit into the mold of what he needed me to be, and how it's hurting not just me, but our kids too. At first, he didn't take it well. He got defensive, said he's always done his best for our family, and asked why I was suddenly complaining after all these years, but I didn't back down. I told him this isn't about blaming him. It's about recognizing what's been wrong for a long time and finally doing something about it. We talked for hours, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like he actually heard me. I don't know if he fully gets it yet, but he admitted that maybe he's been too controlling without realizing it. He said he thought he was doing what a husband was supposed to do, leading, providing, and taking care of his family. I told him that's fine, but it can't come at the expense of my autonomy or our kids' understanding of healthy relationships. The next morning, I made an appointment with a therapist, just for me. I told him I need to work through some things on my own before I can figure out how to fix our marriage. He seemed surprised, maybe even a little hurt, but he didn't argue. I think he knows this is serious now. Therapy has been eye-opening. I've started unpacking how much of myself I've suppressed over the years and why I let it happen. A lot of it goes back to my teenage self, the one who thought marrying an older, wealthier man would solve all her problems. I've realized I've spent my entire adult life feeling like I owed him for rescuing me, even though no one asked him to do that. One session, my therapist asked me, "What would your life look like if you didn't feel like you owed anyone anything?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. But I think that's the question I need to figure out. In the meantime, I've started making small changes. I stopped asking for permission to do things, like spending money or making decisions about the house. It's awkward and uncomfortable, but I'm trying to reprogram myself to see our marriage as a partnership instead of a hierarchy. I've also been more intentional about how I talk to my kids. When my middle daughter told me about another group project where someone was dismissing her ideas, I told her, You deserve to be heard. Stand up for yourself. And when my youngest showed me her art again, I made a big deal about how amazing it was, without asking if Dad had seen it first. The other night, my oldest daughter and I had a long talk about relationships. She asked me how I knew I wanted to stay married to her dad after all these years. I told her the truth. I didn't know. I told her that relationships are complicated and that what matters most is mutual respect, communication, and feeling like you're equals. I told her that if she ever feels like she has to make herself smaller for someone else, that's not love, it's control. As for my husband, things are a work in progress. He's been trying, which is more than I expected. He started asking me what I think about decisions instead of just making them on his own. He's even apologized a few times when he's caught himself slipping into old habits. It's not perfect, but it's a start. I'm not naive enough to think this will be an easy fix, or that it'll ever be completely equal between us. There's too much history, too many ingrained patterns to undo overnight. But for the first time, I feel like I'm moving in the right direction. I've also made peace with the fact that some things might never change, and if they don't, I'll have to decide what's best for me and the kids. But for now, I'm focusing on reclaiming myself, my voice, my independence, my confidence. If I could go back and talk to my 19-year-old self, I'd tell her to think twice, to value herself more, to demand more from a partner, and to trust that she's worth more than just being hot or easy to control. But I can't change the past, so I'm doing the next best thing, changing the future. This isn't a fairy tale ending, but it's real. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like that's enough.